Welcome. It's so great to, well, I can't see you, but it's so great to have you join us tonight for this webinar about rethinking our landscapes in Los Angeles, which is going to be super fun. We have an amazing group of people to talk about this tonight. While you're getting settled in, open up the chat, say hi to us, tell us where you're zooming in from tonight. We have a pretty big territory that we're covering, so it might be fun to see how far, across California, maybe even, who knows, but across the area where, where you're zooming in from. So click on that there. I made sure everybody can do it. There we go. Click on that chat button at the bottom of your screen and say hi to us. In fact, I'm going to do it too, and hopefully everybody else here is going to do it too.
We're very excited for you all to be here.
Yay, Riley, well done. First into the chat and first into the room, so welcome.
Pamela, you're in Colorado. That must mean you're working on your flower garden pilot.
I am. See,
it's very exciting. Yeah, it's very exciting.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. We just had a thunderstorm, which is like, what's that? So yeah, I'm getting all the environmental feels today.
How far along is the project now?
We're seeding.
Nice.
Yeah, so it's a big project. Yes, happy lunar eclipse. Excellent. It's true.
And we should be done. We should be wrapped in plenty of time to see the lunar eclipse. I actually looked this up earlier, and the moon will finish exiting its full shadow by 8:15 Pacific time. And the peak will occur at 7:45, so we should have plenty of time.
Perfect. We can all go out and dance in the moonlight, which sounds like an excellent thing to do after this webinar.
Absolutely. My 2-year-old is obsessed with the moon and is very excited for that tonight.
That's awesome. I see people are coming in, and we often have people who hear that the webinar starts at 6 and then they arrive at 6. So we, of course, we will let this go, keep running, and I'll even keep the chat open just a little bit in case someone has an issue, and then we'll move, we'll move into presentations at 6 o'clock, but gives a little time for people, a minute or two. I love seeing everybody coming in. We've got Deborah and Bonnie and Nicholas and Susan and Terry. See if I can name everybody. I'm working from my laptop, so if I'm squinting, it's just I'm not used to having such a small screen. Tell us where you're zooming in from. We've got another couple of minutes. Go to the chat box. We have a couple of people we have South LA. Oh, this is just not behaving with me. Yeah, we have LA South Bay. We've got Los Angeles, Highland Park. So let us know where you're coming from, because it could be anywhere. Could be anywhere tonight.
I'd also love to hear in the chat box if anybody is already planning to replace their lawn, if maybe started their projects, or what stage you're in. Or maybe you're a renter like me and plan to go rogue and overseed the grass in the coming winter.
We love that idea.
I'm very excited about it.
There are lots of options for having, a watershed-wise landscape in Los Angeles. We have a lot of options. We're really blessed with just an amazing climate, an amazing, opportunity for plants. I mean, one of the largest plant collections are endemic, to Los Angeles and the whole entire world. So it's pretty great to be gardening in LA. Well, we're 6 o'clock. And I know that it's good to let people come in, and probably we're going to get a lot of people who are going to be coming in the next minute or two. But I think if we want to stick to schedule, maybe we get launched, and then we'll manage, everyone over to Q&A maybe when I start.
Wonderful. We're at about 10% of our RSVPs, though I know that that is usually you get somewhere between 25 and 30% of RSVPs, but I'll go ahead and kick us off. First of all, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am Shannon McNeill, Associate Director of Los Angeles Waterkeeper, and welcome to Rethink Your Yard, a water-wise landscaping workshop in partnership with the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. For those of you who are not familiar with LA Waterkeeper, we are primarily a policy and advocacy organization, you probably guessed, focused on water and water conservation, water recycling, all things water supply, and preventing pollution are some of our favorite topics and area of works. But we also are just broadly working to make the LA landscape more resilient. I'm working to restore the Los Angeles River, which is behind me in my background. And we are also leaders in the Safe Clean Water Program, which is a $280 million a year stormwater investment program that was a groundbreaking multi-benefit measure passed here in Los Angeles. And I am so pleased to have three incredible panelists with us tonight. We have Pamela Berstler, who may not need much introduction for those of you that are familiar with Green Gardens Group. If you've ever attended a turf replacement or water-wise landscaping workshop in Southern California, you are probably familiar with Green Gardens Group. We also have Pheobe Gabriel with the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power on with us. And so pleased to have Charles Miller with Climate Reality Project Los Angeles with us here tonight. As far as just a few housekeeping items, and then I will kick us off and pass it over to Pamela for the first presentation. So we have two presentations tonight from Pamela on the sort of tenets of watershed-wise landscaping, and she's going to share with us how that is an evolution from past approaches that were entirely focused on saving water at all costs without some of the nuances that make our landscape more biodiverse. And so very excited for that. Phoebe from LADWP is going to share a presentation about how you can get this fantastic increased $5 per square foot rebate that LADWP offers. And if you're not in LADWP service territory, there is still a rebate for everybody in the MWD sort of Southern California service area, but there is nothing like the $5 square foot that we currently see from LADWP. And then Charles and I are going to talk about some local perspectives as well as some exciting updates on Climate Reality Project's campaign to stop artificial turf here in Los Angeles, which previously was proposed as a water conservation method and just not the alternative we want to see here in LA. We are going to have about 10 or 15 minutes at the end for panel discussion and Q&A. So please leave your questions, your comments in the chat or the Q&A function, and we'll field those towards the end. And just before I hand it off to Pamela, I wanted to sort of center us, in sort of the reason why we're hosting this webinar. I think we all recognize that recent years of drought to drench and our new climate reality really require us to think differently about the ways that we manage our water. In dry years, we are compelled to conserve water, and climate anxiety, I know for me, starts to kick in when we're confronted with those weekly reports that were so often in the news in 2021 and 2022 about the state of our reservoirs being at all-time lows. And then the last 2 years, we've experienced ultra wet, just being inundated by atmospheric rivers, providing an incredible opportunity for stormwater capture that could make our region more resilient. But we also see in those wet years how ill-prepared our region is to capture that precious rainwater, with most of it running into our storm drains, a valuable resource lost, and causing immense pollution of our waterways. LA has historically been a place that experienced these cycles of drier conditions and wetter conditions, and our native plants have evolved under those conditions. But climate change has exacerbated these effects to the extremes. So, in response to this, LA County voters passed Measure W, the Safe Clean Water Program, a $280 million a year stormwater investment program, which was designed to not only prevent pollution, but also create opportunities to capture stormwater for local water supply and also green our communities. But this program has largely ignored the immense potential of privately owned residential land, converting ornamental lawns, which are not only ill-suited for our climate in Southern California as heavy consumers of potable water, they're also polluters with their fertilizer and pesticide use. And so this has really been largely left to residents to address. But in recent years, we've seen some really promising developments, and we're so excited that our guests from Green Gardens Group, LADWP, and Climate Reality Project LA are here to talk about that. And so I'm going to pass it over to Pamela for our first presentation.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Kelly. All right. So we are going to get going here and start rethinking our yard. How do we actually do landscape transformations in LA that make sense? Now, I just want to be clear that climate change and all of everything that goes on with that basically has kept me sleepless. I know that Earth's cycles are essentially broken or they're breaking. And I know we have very limited time to do something about it and turn it on its head. Some say 10 years, but we need to get going now. From my perspective and from our perspective, the number one energy is desertification. Now, okay, that's not desertification, that's desert, but desertification is real. It is essentially what's happening in dry areas all around the world, where you can see on this graph, there are all these red areas and the yellow areas. These are places on the planet, and you can see how much of it's in California. These are places on the planet that are Mediterranean climates or otherwise summer dry types of climates that are being pushed into becoming actual deserts. And these are not deserts as in, millennial history evolved desert ecosystems. These are man-made deserts that are essentially devoid of plant material, devoid of water. It's really the major degradation of our planet, and it's really contributing incredibly to climate change and climate chaos, and we need to deal with it. And here's the thing, we have actually thought about these things, for a long time, since 1936, during the dust storms of 1936, supposedly we refocused on soils and, we made them healthier, but guess what? The same thing that happened in 1936 continues to happen to this day. In fact, if you want to see more about major dust storms that are happening all throughout the West, not just in Arizona, check out hashtag AZDust, and you will see these horrific pictures of dust storms. And this is in today's time. And remember that when we have dust storms like this is Earth's most precious resource leaving a site and going up into the atmosphere. So we really want to be thinking about desertification and how it applies to us. And believe me, I'll get to landscapes in a second, but how it applies to us is that this is fixable. We get desertification when we don't have living roots in the soil, when we don't have plants in the soil, and when we're not passively capturing rainwater, in other words, putting rainwater into soils. That's how soil becomes desertified. That is the main way we dehydrate the land. And when we build, like we build in our cities, like we build in LA, this paradigm essentially is dehydrating the landscape of the water that naturally comes from the sky. So not only do we not have plants that are, doing their thing to cool down the cities, and we're not capturing the rainwater in the ground, but we also now need to use water from our potable water system in order to keep us, keep the land wet and all. So this is a real challenge. But as I said, we can fix it, and we're going to fix it in a garden, because really all the world's problems can be solved. What we really need to do is, it's not, when we talk about change in landscapes, really we have to start with the most important change. The most important change is up here. It's the stuff between our ears that we have to make a change to. We have to start to think differently about what a garden is, how a garden should function. What's the role of gardens in our lives? And then we need to be thinking about, well, what are the things that we can change about our landscapes, our gardens, in order to make them much more consistent with the place in which we live. And so then we can begin to think about the actual steps we're going to take on maybe changing out grass, or planting more native plants, or mulching, or holding on to rainwater, or whatever. So once we make a decision that we're going to change our head, get our head around it, we can actually, start to see things differently. And this is a really important thing, is looking at gardens in a slightly different way. And the way that I want to talk about gardens is what's called the watershed approach. Okay, this isn't actually a watershed. Well, I guess it is. It's a shed on water, but that's not what a watershed is. A watershed is an area of land where all the water that falls on it and all the water that's under it drains to the same place. And when you think about that as a definition of watershed, the watersheds could be massive, like what we imagine, the lakes and the rivers and mountains and all that, or they could also be your neighborhood. So it's just an area of land where all the water that falls on it and all the water that's under it goes to the same place. And your neighborhood is a watershed. And in fact, your home is a watershed. And we can begin to think about our homes as though they're mini watersheds by thinking about, where does the water fall on the property first when it rains? That's going to be probably our roof or a tree, but usually the roof. And where does the water leave our property? Well, that might be a driveway or a sidewalk, where it leaves the property, goes to the neighbor, or goes to the street. But everything in between that high point and that low point of our mini watershed, we get to control. We make all the choices for it, and we can actually improve our own mini watershed so profoundly that it would have impact on our neighborhood and ultimately impact on these bigger watersheds. And there are 4 principles that we bring up as the things we need to do in order to improve our water. The first thing is we grow healthy living soil to act like a sponge. We capture rainwater as a resource. We select climate appropriate plants for that. For us, that's California native plants. And we use highly efficient supplemental irrigation only when necessary. So that means it's irrigation that's manufactured, the system's designed, installed, and maintained properly, and we have a relationship with our irrigation timer. Now, I've only got 15 minutes, so I'm going to do some shorthand here. We call the most important thing in a watershed approach is the living soil sponge. Soil is the great regulator of all water in an environment. It's the great regulator of really everything. And in order to build a soiled sponge, to create a soil that doesn't fly away, but rather holds on to water when it's wet and releases it, holds on to water when it's dry and releases it when it's wet, we need to actually do 2 important things. The first thing is we need to make sure that there is organic matter available for the soil. That means we have compost and mulch in our soil or on our soil. But we also need to do something more important. We need to plant living plants, and a lot of them. Here's why. Plants actually are major carbon sequesters. They use photosynthesis, powered by the sun, to take carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, and they put it into the ground. And what they do is they essentially re-engineer the soil. They turn it from being a brick into a sponge. And they do that because it's the only way they can hold water around their roots. And it's the only way they can get nutrients without addition of nutrients. So this re-engineering of soil is the critical thing that plants do. And that's why we need a lot of plants. But here's the thing. They have a relationship with this massive soil party that is a whole microbial activity in the soil, billions and billions and billions of microbes at every plant root, and they are cycling nutrients and bringing water and taking care of the plants. So that's a soil sponge. The second thing is we need to slow spread, sink, and store rainwater as a resource in every landscape. Did you know that on 1,000 square foot of roof, we can generate 600 gallons of water with just 1 inch of rainfall? And in order to capture all that water, you only need 150 square feet of land area, 6 inches deep, to hold on to all of that water in your garden, not let it run off down the street, and actually benefit your plants. We can also use rain barrels and cisterns to slow down water, and then we redirect the excess into our landscapes. And we just need to develop plans to take advantage of natural water flows on our property and make sure that no yards are flat. So in all of our transformations that we're doing, instead of replacing grass with flat landscape, we need to figure out how we can contour the landscape to hold on to water. Then we select plants that require less water. And as you see here, we have grass that needs about 50 inches of water a year, but we can select low water requiring plants and even very low ones, which are a lot of our California natives, that can actually exist on rainwater alone. So they don't require the same amount of water as grass. And then we get as many of these plants in the soil as possible so we can start building that sponge. We also want to select plants that have a lot of different solar panel structures, and solar panels are leaves for plants. So we want a lot of different types, not just one particular type, because the more differentiation we have in solar panels, the more diversity we see in the landscape, and the more diversity we have in the root structures. And this is really, really important because we want diversity above ground and below ground. When we have below ground diversity, we have really strong soil parties, biological systems that are holding on to water, as I said, but also they're cycling nutrients. This eliminates the need to have to put in any kind of fertilizer into the soil. Also, when we have this diversity of plant types, we are inviting more diversity of pollinators and natural predators for insects that we don't prefer to have in our landscape. This eliminates the need for pesticides. And we're not sacrificing beauty when we do this. I mean, look at this. This is as beautiful as anything. And this is California native plants at work. And even if we're talking about lawns, we don't have to sacrifice. We just have to get our head around changing things. We can have really biodiverse lawns as well. They don't have to be monocultured. We can actually grow deep roots in lawns by making sure that we have a lot of different kinds of plants there and really just rethinking what it takes to have a beautiful lawn. That can be a part of transformation just as much as ripping out grass and replacing it with something else. We can create these really beautiful ecosystems, keeping grass in place, and it achieves all the same benefits. Now, I'm not saying that you have to go this way. I'm saying it's an option. This is a watershed-wise landscape. They removed grass and they replaced it with this. This is not. And it's not just, you notice it's over the grass. That's because this is a monoculture of grass. This is one kind of grass. It's a water guzzler. This is not a watershed-wise landscape. But this is one that is an ecosystem filled with California native plants that are maximizing biodiversity. This isn't. This may save water. It may check boxes that says, okay, we have the requisite number of plants here. We've got this permeable surface of decomposed granite, but this is a dead sponge. So this isn't doing anything for us in the big picture of climate change, and even in terms of beauty, honestly. Think this is a watershed approach, not this. This is a gravel landscape. It kills the sponge. Look at how gorgeous this is. This is holding on to rainwater. It's hugely biodiverse. This isn't. This is just killing the sponge. This is killing Los Angeles. We cannot have this anymore. Okay, so once we select lots of beautiful and a huge diversity of plants, we also want to have highly efficient supplemental irrigation. That means either very efficient rotating nozzles, spray heads, or drip irrigation. We're going to need to do some work and understand what our irrigation system is. You either hire a professional to help you or get out there and do some mapping yourself. We have some tools for you to help you do that. Make sure you fix all the problems with your irrigation, no matter what you're going to do. And even before you go ahead and do a transformation, fix the problems. And then install drip irrigation if you do take out your grass and replace it with garden. And we definitely want you to be managing your irrigation controller. The timer is super important. You're not watering the same all year round. In the fall, you need to cut it back so that you're not watering as much as you did in the summer. So how do we actually make a transition from grass to garden? Well, we recommend the first thing is dedicate 20% to nature. Start small. Cut back your lawn just around the edges. Take 2 or 3 feet of lawn out all around your garden. Dedicate it to nature by planting California native plants. Move your spray irrigation system in to keep on your lawn, and you can actually have a landscape that's super beautiful. You still have a little bit of lawn, but now you have, other landscape. And here's the thing, you don't even have to add new irrigation into that area where you cut back. The overspray from the water that's spraying on the lawn will actually keep these other areas green. Or you can go the whole way by cutting back the lawn and then installing drip irrigation in the gap between, let's say, the sidewalk or driveway and where you're going to be planting your new plants. Don't forget the parkway. Parkways are great places to start. You can do a little bit of experimentation. They can actually be an extension of your yard and make it all look a lot bigger. And it's a great way to kind of get going. Definitely start with trees. Don't be afraid of planting large landscape trees. They're super important to our environment and they love company. So plant groups of them. One is never happy. You need 3. And when you do plant trees, put in a new dedicated irrigation zone just for those trees. Why? Well, because when we come into our next drought, you're going to want to keep your trees watered. And let's suppose you have trees that are already in your landscape. We do this, what we call Buzz Lightyear design, which is basically cut away the grass from underneath the tree all the way out to the canopy and beyond. That's the Buzz Lightyear part. And then install new irrigation, drip irrigation just for the tree there, mulch it heavily. Now their tree is separated from your grass. Timing is really important when you do all this stuff. A lot of your planting should be happening in the summertime so that in the fall into the very, very early spring, through the winter and into early spring, you can do your work. Create a design before you're applying for your rebates. And we do classes that can help you come up with a simple design. Metropolitan Water District also has resources. LADWP has excellent resources. You're actually going to get a copy of this book after this webinar as a thanks. LADWP has put together a whole book on how to create a watershed-wise landscape. And we do webinars 3 times a week. They're hour-long to 90-minute webinars, and we break it down into all of its parts, and there's always a landscape expert dedicated to answering questions in the back. So just come on to ask your questions of the landscape expert. And then finally, if you know someone who's a landscape professional, or maybe even you yourself want to learn a lot more, we're doing a professional training in Downey in November on the 6th and 7th, and we invite you to come. It's sponsored by SoCal Gas. And that is the end. You can reach me at curious@greengardensgroup.com. And I look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you so much, Pamela. You sure know how to make water conservation fun. Um, and
Thanks.
some of your pictures reminded me of one of my favorite things to do in my neighborhood is walk around and admire all of the beautiful watershed-wise landscapes we have. And some of my neighbors must have taken your classes because I see no xeriscaping, no mulch, no rock gardens, just beautiful, lush native plant gardens.
That's great.
And so I am so pleased to introduce our next panelist who will be presenting from Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. Phoebe San Gabriel is going to be here to help everyone understand the process of accessing the incredible rebates that LADWP has right now. I know that for some of us, this can be a daunting task to, once you've planned your fraud project, figure out, how to go through the rebate process. And so I'm going to kick it over to Phoebe.
Thank you so much, Kelly. So let me just go ahead and get my PowerPoint up here for everybody. Okay. So once again, good evening, everyone. My name is Phoebe. I'm a utility services specialist with the Water Conservation Group at LADWP, or the Department of Water and Power. I wanted to thank also G3 and Kelly at Waterkeeper for putting the workshop together. And I've got a lot more technical things to go through with you, so I'm just going to go ahead and get into it. Okay. So I'm sure, we've all heard the phrases such as save water or save resources, but ultimately, what does that really mean and why is it important? Well, in 2011, the global population reached 7 billion people. And just recently in 2022, that number actually jumped up to 8 billion people, which is just blows my mind. And studies show that these numbers are only going to keep going up in time. So when you're thinking of supply and demand, our demand is exceedingly surpassing the already limited supply of natural resources we have. And arguably one of the most important resources is fresh water. So what role does water conservation play with LADWP's mission? Well, we strive to meet the needs of our customers and provide reliable water and power services in a cost-effective and environmentally responsible manner. We do this through practices such as reducing water consumption and pollution, conserving resources, and replenishing groundwater. We want our customers to be actively aware of their water usage and how to save this resource. So one example I like to think of is using drought, or thinking of drought as a large debt, such as a mortgage. Just because you had a really rainy season or you made a few extra payments that year does not mean you're quite out of debt yet. And another concept that contributes to our collective goals is water resilience, right? So we want to pay back those debts and replenish that groundwater, like Pamela was mentioning. We also want to encourage the use of native and non-invasive plants, which helps just support that notion of creating a sponge to replenish those groundwater supplies. And one of my personal statements, I think I mentioned with Pam the last time I saw her, is I like to say, let's live with the land and not on the land. All right, so here are some quick stats to think about that are often out of sight, out of mind, or maybe you didn't even know about them at all. A thing to note is when you have a toilet leak, for instance, it's a very common issue. And a lot of times it ends up being about 1 gallon per minute, which doesn't sound like a lot, but really that's over 1,400 gallons a day. So each day that that leak goes unrepaired, you're using, close to 1 billion unit of water per day, or wasted. And then also, if one person were to use all of these appliances just once per day for an average amount of time, that's already using about 175 gallons per day. Something to think about. Now, I just quickly want to touch on some of what we call menu-based items before jumping into the lawn stuff. we do have a free device program that offers shower heads and bathroom and kitchen faucet aerators. Having these devices at these flow rates can actually produce savings of up to 7,000 gallons per year. So I would strongly suggest that you check your household devices to see if they match what we have. Usually the GPM or the gallons per minute is on like the base of the device where it's connected to the water source or closer to the sprayer head. Okay, so we also have a program in conjunction with the Metropolitan Water District, or MWD, for the products that are shown here for both indoor and outdoor use. And just to note, I know there are some people who might be outside of the city limits. However, our DWP customers do get a very generous incentive for some of these products. For instance, I think in one of my friends' areas, a clothes washer is only about $85 for the rebate, and we offer up to $500 per rebate. So I usually let anybody know, if you live in the city limits, please, please, please take advantage of these rebates. And I'll get into the specifics on how you can apply for these later. Okay. So now the meat and potatoes of what I really want to talk about, the turf replacement program. So this is also in conjunction with MWD through their SoCal Water Smart program. One of the most important things that I do want to note, though, is compared to the programs that I just mentioned, this one does require a little bit more work, and it does require pre-approval prior to breaking ground on your project. So one thing you may or may not know is that maintaining turf is typically the highest use of water for residential customers, and it makes up about 50 to 70% of your annual water consumption. So therefore, by making a more sustainable landscape that'll help you reduce your water use, again, recharge that groundwater, reduce that urban runoff, and enhance natural wildlife as well. And then just please keep in mind that there is a minimum requirement for these projects of 250 square feet and up to a maximum of 5,000 square feet for residential customers. Let's see, and I also want to note actually that we do have continual efforts to make the program more environmentally conscious and accessible to our customers. So, while we do strive to have more lawns that have, the features that Pamela just mentioned, we are a little lax on some of the things just because we take into account the diversity in our customers and what they can do, and we'd rather them do something than nothing. So we also, in October of 2022, increased our rebate amount from $3 to $5. So again, it's definitely something special and something to take advantage of. And I know I mentioned also about the artificial turf. We actually don't allow that specifically for the program for rebates, because the city recognizes that there are harmful chemicals and plastics and things within the materials that make the artificial turf. So we don't want that absorbing into the ground or draining out into the street. Okay, so these are the specific requirements that you need to receive the rebate. That all turf must be removed from the project area. You must include at least 3 Californian friendly plants per 100 square feet of the project area. All plants must have a 3-inch deep ring of mulch surrounding it. Any exposed soil must be covered with something like mulch or rock. Any exposed soil must be covered. The project must include a rain capture feature such as a rock garden or a cistern or rain barrel. And any sprinklers must be removed, capped, or converted into a drip irrigation system. You do also have the option to hand water if you wanted. But also just pay close attention to any emails or the terms and conditions when you do apply, since those are subject to change periodically. And I know this is a lot to look at and remember, but I promise I'll provide some resources at the end that have just a wealth of information. There's like checklists for how to go about your project. There's guides. If you want to, hire contractors or do it yourself, we have anything and everything you can think of. And if not, let us know. I especially have 2 links for LADWP. One of them is for our overall landscaping guidelines. That's where you'll find that checklist. We also have a new dedicated website called California Friendly Landscaping. And that one's really cool because it has a design library. So you can literally go through and, I have 800 square feet to work with, and you can go through and pick different designs that are already pre-made. And then also we have links on there to those G3 classes, which I just wanted to, give another shout out to them for being so great and making, especially during the pandemic, making everything accessible online and still pushing through with educating our customers. So we're really grateful for that. Okay, and then the rebate does include the parkway, but there are a couple requirements that are a little more stringent since it's subject to city codes. The main takeaways, however, are that the plants must cover 80% of the parkway area once it's fully grown. And there's more restrictions on the types of plants allowed because you want to remember that this is part of public use. So you want to just be mindful of things that might be harmful to people, especially children and pets. But you can find a full set of details and the city code itself if you go to the LADWP.com website and search Parkway. Now I'm going to just show you some quick before and afters, similar to what Pam had, but maybe a little fresh in the project. So just keep in mind that, it hasn't been grown in yet. There also might be some lawns that, are a little dead just because we had a severe drought and restricted watering. So we made an exception for some of the pre-project photos to have like dead grass and things like that. Okay. So you see here, this is an example of, you can see that it will be thriving like once it starts growing in there. Slide. And then this one is a couple examples of some grown in areas. I especially like this one on the right because it feels like the house looks like a little cottage and they made their own personal meadow. So that's one of my favorites to share. And then also, of course, we do have the LADWP demonstration garden, which is right in front of our headquarters in downtown LA on 1st Street and Hope. And I just think it's awesome that you can have something like this, like right in the middle of downtown amongst the skyscrapers and everything. All right, so now some of the technical details as far as how to apply. For both the menu-based rebates and the turf replacement program, you'll be going to SoCalWatersmart.com. There's going to be a little pop-up window like this that asks if you're interested in residential or commercial rebates. So you'll want to click on the appropriate one. And then you'll go to the menu item here for rebates, go to rebates. I think it says available rebates, and you'll see there like toilets, clothes washers, etc. So when you're doing the menu-based ones, again, just be prepared to upload a copy of the first page of your LADWP bill, most recent one, a receipt showing the product was paid for in full, and it must also include the brand, model, and individual price of each product. And then residential customers do have up to 1 year from the date of purchase to apply. So if this is the first time you're hearing about it and you purchased something recently, don't worry, just go on there. They do have a full list that they update periodically for the exact model and make and model for each of the products. Okay. And then when if you're interested in doing the turf replacement program, there's a little bit more involved because you do have to create a profile. That way you can access the status, you can build your application, over time. You don't have to do it all at once. And then you'll also be able to access it when you're done with the project. So what you'll need for this are photos of the proposed area. So typically we'd like to say 5 photos. So one of them being an overall view of the area, and then a photo from each corner. And that's for the front yard, the backyard, and then the parkways, typically like 2 or 3 photos is fine. You'll also want, again, the first page of your recent LADWP bill, and you'll also need a site plan, which is either drawn, some people handwrite it, like kind of, like sentence style, and that's totally fine. Or, if you have an architect that you hired to plan your garden. And you also need a couple bits of information, like the size of the total square footage. So if you wanted to include your front yard, backyard, and parkway, you'll need that total amount. And then you'll also need the type of rain capture feature you're using and what type of irrigation you'll be using moving forward. And just make sure you really read through those terms and conditions before you apply and you submit the application, and you'll just need to type in your name as an e-signature once you're ready to apply. Okay, so just a quick timeline of how it goes for the turf replacement program. After you've created your profile and you've submitted your photos, your documents and everything, and you've e-signed for submitting your application, it takes about 2 weeks to get your pre-approval. Once you get that pre-approval, you have 180 days or 6 months to complete the project. Once it's completed, you'll take photos again from the same areas and update that into your profile. And then from then, it can take another 2 to 4 weeks for approval. And then after that, once you get that final approval, everything's good and cleared, we've done any necessary inspections if needed, you'll get your check within about 10 weeks. Okay, and then lastly, these are those resources that I promised for you guys. If you want the free devices, that would be in the first part here. For those menu-based, again, SoCalWatersmart.com. I included their phone number as well in case you have technical difficulties with them. And then the 2 landscaping tools that I was talking about. And if you wanted to reach out directly to Water Conservation for any questions, or you want specific information for something that I mentioned today, this is how to contact us. And thank you so much. I'll turn it back to Kelly.
Thank you so much, Phoebe. And then I'm going to see, if you don't mind stopping screen sharing, I'm going to see if I can get Charles and I in the center of the screen. Let's see. Nope, I can't do that. Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much, Phoebe. And for those of you who are requesting links to resources, because there seems to be some issues with copying them from the chat, I will work with all of the panelists to gather relevant references, links, resources, etc. And when we share the recording with everybody who registered after this, we'll also share those links. And so I'd love to introduce our next panelist, and we're going to have a little bit more of an open dialogue, sort of interview podcast style. And so welcome Charles Miller from LA Climate Reality Project. Charles, do you want to just briefly introduce yourself and who you are, and the same with Climate Reality Project?
Sure. Thanks, Kelly. Charles Miller, I'm the chair of the LA chapter of Climate Reality Project. We are the largest chapter of the International Climate Reality Project. If you saw the Inconvenient Truth films that were done by Al Gore years ago, at the very end of that, in the scroll, it says we're going to put together an organization to try to address climate and talk about climate and affect people's opinion on it and address the problem in the world together. This is the aftermath, the outgrowth of that. And our chapter is heavily involved in lots of different areas of advocacy and also just volunteerism within the community of LA. And we're at laclimatereality.org. If anybody is interested, come on by. It's no membership cost whatsoever. You can just stop by and say you're a member, and boom, you're a member. So that's what that's about. My background is that I'm a sustainability professional and have an education in that, heavily focused on biodiversity. I represented California at the United Nations COP15 on biodiversity, involved with state efforts on that right now, and advocacy for USGBC California and lots of other areas. You can read my bio at the LA Climate Reality site if you're interested in more about me. So thanks for the opportunity here, and thank you to Pamela and Phoebe for those great presentations.
Charles, one of the reasons that I'm most excited to have you here is to talk about something that, without discussing with other panelists, has sort of just organically come up in this conversation, which is artificial turf. So for those of you who don't know, earlier this year, the California State Legislature passed SB 676, which restores the power to local governments to decide whether to ban or regulate artificial turf in residential settings. Charles, you and I have done some interviews together, and I know one of my colleagues, Ben, has been on a panel that Climate Reality Project hosted on this. Can you tell us a little bit about the SoCal Stop Artificial Turf Task Force and how this is related to the issues that we're talking about today?
Sure. So artificial turf is kind of a misdirection in the larger focus of trying to create solutions. It is kind of the opposite of a nature-based solution. Because it's just covering the world with plastic carpet to simulate grass. And, the origin very quickly starts, back in the 60s, they needed to figure out a way to put fake grass in a baseball stadium in Houston that had a dome on it. And they realized, oops, if we build a dome, we can't plant grass here and play baseball on it. So the solution was they got together with DuPont and Monsanto and made plastic grass. After a generation of putting those in sports stadiums all over the world, they discovered this is really bad for athletes. It tears up their bodies. It's not good in that respect. It's actually a lot more work to take care of than we thought. So that industry kind of pivoted and said, hey, everybody, we've got this great product here and it'll save water because you don't have to water plastic, right? And they really focused on school installations, intramural kind of playing field situations, and private installations as well. And so a lot of people kind of were taking the best advice out there 20, 25 years ago when they were being told, this is a great thing we can do to save water. We have all this, concern about the use of our resources, and using this plastic stuff would make a lot of sense. It's counterintuitive to cover the earth with plastic carpet and think that you're actually doing something good for nature. That being said, a lot of it has been done, and we now have a good sample of data that says, this stuff is bad in a number of reasons. But most importantly, it doesn't actually do a very good job of doing the thing that we want it to do, and that is to save water. The problem for that is that, first of all, you're creating an impermeable surface by putting plastic carpet on a landscape. You are avoiding the ability to capture water. Some of the things that Pamela was talking about in terms of designing your yard to maximize it. Well, frankly, plastic carpet is about the most extreme opposite of that, because everything just kind of sloughs right off and you don't capture anything. And you also mostly sterilize the soil that is below this layer of plastic. So it's a real problem in that respect. It's also a problem, especially because it creates more of a heat island effect within the city. So Climate Reality Project is extremely focused on climate issues because it's in our name. But what we need to always point out is that climate is a biodiversity issue as well. It's not just a few higher temperatures that is going to kill everybody in the planet. It's the loss of the life on the planet. So anything we do that makes it harder for life to exist here is actually the real issue. And so that's why when we have a product here that vastly increases temperature more than concrete, more than asphalt, more than a lot of other hard surfaces, it greatly increases temperatures. I'll give you an example. We did a test of surface temperatures 2 weeks ago when we had the little brief kind of heat spell in Los Angeles. In the valley, we were looking at temperatures around 103, 105 in some spaces. At that same day, We measured concrete in adjacent areas. You're looking at 130. You're looking at really, extreme temperature there. Artificial turf is coming in at 180 in our measurements. And that is at the point where it burns human skin. I mean, it's a real health hazard. So we have situations where LAUSD and the city of LA and our Rec and Parks division has installed a bunch of this stuff. They're actually watering the surfaces to cool them down enough so that children can play on them. So the promised savings in water go away that way. The promised savings in water go away because we don't capture water when we get our precious 15-ish inches of rain in Los Angeles region that we don't manage to grab and put back into the earth. And then the water is also lost because we have to clean this stuff regularly. When you destroy the bacteria in the soil by putting plastic over it, then you don't have the ability to break down all the human fluids, to be quite, blunt, that happen to take place when people play on artificial turf. So the spit, the all the other stuff, I'll let you fill in the blank kind of stuff. All that breaks down in a natural system. When pets run onto the field and a dog urinates on the field, that can break down if there's healthy soil there because there's bacteria of different types that, make that part of nature again. Not true when it's basically a big thing of plastic. And so you have to then put cleansing agents on the stuff and wash it. And so many of the promises about water savings, we're comparing artificial turf to the heaviest, most intense water use grasses that really have no business being in LA anyway. We have much more drought tolerant grass mixes that can be used now, and really good opportunities to greatly reduce water use without using this product. And so I have some really good news, Kelly, too. We started our coalition along with many other groups in Los Angeles, including some in this room, to try to address this and to take advantage of the opportunity created by 676. And just today at City Council, we passed Council File 0602, which essentially started a study among all of the divisions within the city government to determine the implications of moving toward a ban of artificial turf, both on private and public surfaces. And so we didn't solve the problem, but we've created the first step toward moving in the right direction. And we're changing the landscape quite metaphorically as well as literally by moving in this direction. And so it's a really good first step to get all the city agencies on board with reporting about this and talking about this. And I have to tell you, though, the battle is definitely Los Angeles. The national battleground right now on artificial turf is our home, because the fossil fuel industry, remember, plastics all come from fossil fuels. The fossil fuel industry is committed heavily toward making a stand here, as are the companies that buy and purchase and manufacture and install artificial turf. They're spreading a lot of information that's not exactly accurate, and it's going to be an interesting battle going forward.
Charles, thank you so much. You touched on a lot of issues that are very important to LA Waterkeeper, and I know our panelists, as well as I'm sure many of the people that are participating today, from artificial turf not fulfilling that promise of really conserving water, degrading our habitat further, and something that I personally, as both a waterkeeper as well as a pet owner and a new mom, it's really important to me, are the pollution impacts, both from the exposure that we all have to plastics and PFAS, as well as how that, through the application of water and the degradation just from heat and utilization, how that those pollutants can end up in our groundwater, can end up in our surface waters, etc. And so it's great to hear about the efforts being made here in LA. And, just anecdotally, I'm surprised that folks here, and there are some folks here in LA, including those in my personal network, that still like the idea of artificial turf. I'm so grateful for LADWP's increase in their rebate and all the tremendous resources that are available, and the Stop Artificial Turf Task Force, a lot of the education, the language that you provided, because it's helped me convince one of my closest friends who just purchased a home that was planning on installing artificial turf. Maybe maybe I'll open this up because we only have about 5 minutes left to the panel. But for people who have already installed artificial turf, is there anything that you all would suggest that they do? Should they wait until it comes to the end of its lifespan? Should they rip it out now? And are there any resources available to folks like this?
I'll jump in first because I've been neck deep on this issue for quite a while, but I would say it's really important in our advocacy that we start with the idea that we don't make the perfect the enemy of the good, because most of the people who installed artificial turf did it on advice that was probably not good advice, encouraging them to do this because they thought it was a sustainable choice. They thought it was a way to save resources and do something that was good for the planet. And so there's an upside though. The upside is that this product, which doesn't accomplish any of the things it says, also doesn't last very long. And so the good news here is that, I mean, the bad news, of course, is that this is not a recyclable product, no matter what they tell you. I mean, it's recyclable only if you want to spend like $1 million a yard or something to recycle it. Just never will be recyclable on an economy of scale. And so it gets warehoused or gets in our landfills, which all that leaching you're talking about continues to happen. We've measured 38 tons of PFAS will be leached off of a playing field during its functional life. But getting back to your question, you're really looking at about a functional lifespan of 10 to 15 years for this product. And so there's an opportunity there that no matter where you are in that cycle, not too far down the line, you're going to be able to make a choice between putting it back in, where you have to rip it out, send it to the landfill, and put in a whole nother set to start the process over, or adopting a much more sound, sustainable approach, which is frankly much cooler because you get butterflies and you get all kinds of cool, excellent, more fun things to enjoy about life. If you go with, a more sustainable, life-giving kind of landscaping choice, like the stuff Pamela was talking about. So I would say for starters, you say, hey, start planning right now, because this is only going to last, a decade or so, and you're going to have to replace it anyway because it falls apart and just becomes a mess. So start figuring out what you want to do and take advantage of all these resources so that when that moment comes, boom, you're ready to take advantage of those things. Now, I am not aware of, and to answer your other element of your question, I'm not aware at the moment of any rebates for removing artificial turf, but that is something that our organization is working to incorporate into our advocacy, and to see at the municipal level and at the state level. We're hoping to see those things come to fruition in the future. So stay tuned on that. And we're definitely hoping that will be part of what the conversation is going forward.
That's wonderful. I know we are close out of time, and I think we've answered all of the questions in the chat so far. But in our last couple of minutes, there's just sort of one thing that's really resonating with me that I'm just wondering, sort of, Pamela, especially what you think of this. And then there is sort of a sticky question that I get asked all the time, and I saw in our chat, and I wanted to see if maybe we were interested in trying to talk about the nuance of the challenges of answering this question. But first of all, something that really resonates with me is this concept of think global, act local. I'm sure most of us have heard that in terms of climate change, sustainability. And when I look around Los Angeles and I think about how densely populated our urban environment is, and about 70% of the land in Los Angeles is privately owned, how could that concept apply to thinking about our yards as ecosystems, as part of our ecosystem, or in some places in Los Angeles, the only ecosystem that is not concrete? Does that resonate with you all? Pamela, do you just, I don't know, have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really why we turned our principles into the water check approach, so that you began to think about how your individual property actually fits into the mosaic of land use, throughout the entire city and beyond. It only takes 30,000 acres, which really isn't very much, of land area converted into plants to have an impact on weather. So, you can start to think, wow, what would the city look like if we had, all of these biodiversity corridors, where insects and birds and so forth could actually find what they need in order to thrive, in a city. What would it be like if if we walked down the street and the city was cool? You know, what would it be like if we had gentle rain instead of these torrential downpours offset by epic drought? You know, what would it be like if the city smelled like the native plants of California? Like, how amazing would that be? So there are all of these human, and oh, by the way, humans require nature stimulus in order to keep our brains working, you know, and being creative. Otherwise, we actually shut down if we don't have a stimulus of the fractals and other stuff that's going on in nature. So, you know, a city can be like that. Los Angeles could be a, you know, world leader in doing this. And I think one of the most important things for us to remember or realize is that there is an appropriate use of water in the landscape. It's not zero water. That is not the objective. The objective is to have just the right amount so that we can stimulate all this growth that we need to have. And so I think that this is really an opportunity for us to start to rethink our cities and rethink about how it's not just, you know, I used to say your home begins where the sidewalk ends. You know, the lawn or the yard is not just an amenity. It's essential for us as individuals, as a family, as, you know, a community. So I do think that that this effort that we're taking on right now to have appropriate landscapes with just the right amount of water, no artificial turf. I mean, what a disaster that is. I think that this is really the great revolution that we can have, that we can spark, you know, right here in Los Angeles. So let's do it.
That feels like such a positive note to end on, rather than trying to answer the unwieldy question of what are the range of costs associated. But I love LA Waterkeeper, through our partnership with Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, has been building a resource library, including a blog series about water conservation. And we have a blog series that is sort of breaking down this different steps around turf replacement. And so maybe I can connect with some of our experts here today privately, and maybe one of our next blogs will try to answer that tricky question. But as we're a few minutes over, and I know we're going to be losing some of our attendees soon. Any closing thoughts from our wonderful panelists?
Thank you for the opportunity to be here. This is something I think we all care a great deal about. And at the beginning of the evening, I put my email in the chat. If anybody wants to follow up with me on anything, this is my jam. I dig it. Reach out.
And so inspiring, and it gives me a lot of hope for the future of a climate resilient and an equitable Los Angeles when I get a chance to connect with so many passionate people working on these issues. And I know that does not just extend to those panelists we have on tonight, but to many, if not all of you in our audience. Thank you so much for all that you do, whether it be in your yards or through your personal habits to try and make our world a little bit healthier, greener, more sustainable. Phoebe, any closing thoughts from you?
Yeah, no, I'm just glad to have the opportunity again to, you know, share with you guys like what is available out there for you, and to express my own personal, you know, like goals and things for wanting to see a rejuvenated city. That would be great.
Well, thank you so much for everyone attending and staying a few minutes over. In the next few days, we will send over the recording as well as a series of links to the resources that we shared tonight. Thank you so much, and good evening. And go out and enjoy the lunar eclipse if you can see it. I don't see the moon in the horizon quite yet for me.
Sounds great. What a joy to be with all of you. Thank you so much for inviting me. And thank you all for attending.